Mattie Duppler of Americans for Tax Reform, and I'm looking through this release that you guys put out of the 442 proposed tax hikes since the president has taken office. Many of them are in effect, are they not?
Well, we've got a couple of these tax hikes that have taken effect, but we did not look at separate legislation that has been passed, things like Obamacare, that was a separate bill itself. We essentially wanted to get a snapshot of what the president wishes he could do if he didn't have to cooperate with Congress. If he just got carte blanche to do what he wanted, he would have passed all these tax hikes into law. And the interesting part, there's a couple interesting things about here. One is that when you're looking at his past budgets, he always wanted to raise taxes on people making over $250,000. Now, of course, this was his central campaign promise that he would never raise taxes on people making less than that, which it only took him 16 days into his presidency to throw that promise out the window by signing S-chip into law and a huge tobacco tax increase. And, of course, 20 newer higher taxes in Obamacare, a lot of those hitting people making less than $250,000. But what we have now is the president has had to kind of bite back that plan because of what happened with the fiscal cliff, with Republicans putting pressure on Democrats. And essentially, we have the president to sign 85% of the Bush tax cuts into law. So there's been a lot of battles over this proposed plan, and we have been able to make a lot of headway on them, despite the fact that you've got Harry Reid in charge of the Senate, and you still have the president in the White House.
Now, Mattie Duppler, when I worked at ATR, you probably know this by heart because you were much better at this sort of stuff than I was. The chart that was sort of like the placemat, the hidden taxes, that's what I think most people don't realize is what percentage of, say, a gallon of gasoline or a bottle of liquor or a can of beer or a pack of cigarettes or a gun or whatever are taxes and regulations and the burden placed on it by government. You do Tax Freedom Day. Tax Freedom Day is coming up, I believe, near the end of the next week?
I believe that's correct.
And talk a little bit about the hidden costs, because when you go to the pump, you think $4 a gallon. These oil companies are really screwing us over. But in fact, it's the oil companies are making the least out of everybody involved in that gallon of gas. The government makes a nice big chunk of that.
Oh, absolutely, because they're one of the government's favorite villains as well. And if you go to the affiliate site that I run for ATR, costofgovernment.org, we have the document that you're talking about. It's called our tax bites. So what we do is we look at a lot of common goods and services and just calculate how much of the cost of that good or service is actually due to government. And we look at the whole picture here, right? It's not just an excise tax on top of the tobacco you're purchasing. It's actually the full burden of taxation that companies have to put up with. You know, corporate income tax, it's workman's comp, it's payroll tax. So looking at that, the bite that government takes out of the price of goods is much bigger than you would think. You know, you mentioned gasoline. For a gallon of gas, the price is driven up 44.5%. That part of that price, 44% of that price, is due to government. So like you said, this isn't the oil companies who are making money off of your purchase. It's the government. And things, you know, like we mentioned earlier, this compulsion by politicians to try and tax things they don't want people to consume, like alcohol, like tobacco. This tells the story right there. If you're looking at beer is at 44% of the price of a six-pack of beer. That's all due to government. Looking at soda, same thing, about 30% there. So these are all things that it doesn't, you know, it's not immediately evident when you're in the store purchasing these items. But when you take a step back and look at how much the price is driven up by government, it's really quite shocking.
And this isn't just straight taxes. This is the regulatory burden and all the compliance issues that the government puts up, the barriers to market that the government puts up that cost money to get over. So you're looking at vaccines, 29% of the cost of vaccines. You would think that the government would try and get out of their way. But even up to airfare, 43% of airfare goes up there. This is how government gets away with all of this. In this state, in Maryland, we had the governor raise the gas tax, and he has such a fetish for gas taxes and taxes in general that he set it up so he could raise taxes long after he leaves office. His plan will raise. But when you go to the pump, people just take out their anger at the oil company because they're the ones gouging, and then they're paraded up before Capitol Hill to try and justify why it's costing them so much. But is there I mean, is there no push? There was a push for a while to make these amounts known. You guys are doing it, but on the package, like on the pump or something like that. Aren't there laws against pointing out how much the government costs of this gallon of gas?
Yeah, you see that with airlines right now. Airlines are under that kind of regulation where they're not allowed to break out the cost of government. And as you mentioned before, looking at airfare, just a one-way trip, 44% of the cost of that is all made up of government taxes and fees. And airlines right now aren't allowed to show that. So, you know, you used to have all these really great discount airlines that could advertise these prices that got people, you know, buying tickets for weekend vacations, that sort of thing. Well, they can't advertise those prices anymore, regardless of the fact that that is the price. It's government that makes it more expensive. So there's actually legislation in Congress right now to change that. I think it's called the Airline Tax Transparency or something to that effect. But it tells you exactly what the effort needs to be. It needs to be aimed at transparency. It needs to be aimed at letting taxpayers and consumers know that what they are buying, what they are purchasing, the contracts they're entering into, they're all influenced by either government regulation, government taxes, and they're made more expensive because of it.
The government doesn't keep stuff from us because they think we'll like it. I think it could be the easiest way to do it. They don't try and hide these fees and taxes because they think everybody will just think that's awesome. That's great.
Exactly.
Now, Mattie, before we let you go, last question. As somebody who has yet to mail off their taxes, when looking at the tax code as it is, but the stories are now that you're less likely to be audited this year because the poor, sweet, nourishing IRS is overburdened with Obamacare and things like that. Do you have any advice for us last-minute tax preparers?
Just write the check and write it with a handy glass of wine or maybe some distilled spirits next to you, and try not to look at the tax plate while you do it so you don't know how much of that glass of wine is actually due to government.
That's right. Do the shots while you're writing the check, not while you're doing the taxes.
Exactly.
Mattie Duppler, Americans for Tax Reform, appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Derek.